we learn not to fear death. The plague of 250 roused the Christians of Carthage to action under the leadership of their bishop, Cyprian. Pagan authorities blamed the Christians for triggering the displeasure of the gods. The emperor, Decius, pronounced the death penalty on those who would not bow before the imperial gods. But Cyprian implored his flock to minister to the physical needs of their oppressors, regardless of the dangers to themselves posed by both persecution and contagion. But nevertheless, it distributes some that the power, or disturbs some, that the power of this disease attacks our people equally with the heathen, as if the Christian believed for this purpose that they might have the enjoyment of the world and this life free from contact of ills, and not as those who undergo all adverse things here and are reserved for future joy. Further, beloved brethren, what a great thing is it, how pertinent, how necessary, that a pestilence and plague which seems horrible and deadly searches out the righteousness of each man, of each one, and examines the minds of the human race to see whether they who are in health tend the sick, whether relations affectionately love their kindred, whether masters pity their languishing servants, whether physicians do not forsake the beseeching patients, whether the fierce suppress their violence, whether the rapacious can quench the even insatiable ardor of the raging avarice even by the fear of death, whether the haughty bend their neck, whether the wicked soften their boldness, whether when their dear ones perish, the rich even then bestow anything and give, when they are to die without heirs. Even though this mortality conferred nothing else, it has granted these benefits to Christians and to God's servants, that we begin gladly to desire martyrdom, as we learn not to fear death. These are trainings for us, not deaths. They give the mind the glory of fortitude. By contempt of death, they prepare for the crown. And that was Cyprian of Carthage. And this is all minus one, folks. How are we doing today? Today is January 6th, the big day. I'm back from my hiatus. I actually was going to record yesterday, but got a little busy and could not get around to it, so I'm doing it today. Of course, I have not been on hiatus from the live show. We were with Matt Christensen on Monday. Go check that out over on the Ends Justify the Memes. We had our friend on Kizza GT Saturday, and Yiz the Eunuch on last Wednesday. We'll be live tonight, just Tank and I talking about all of the fallout from today after today is pretty much over. In any case, guys, if you like my content, please hit the like button, share, subscribe. You know the thing. You know the thing. Anyways, let's get back to the topic, and that is the plague of Cyprian. Now, an important note here that I want to bring up is that he talks about here about martyrdom and preparing for crowns. And he talks about the different things that the plague at his day may have brought upon the people, the things, the good light that people can see. One of the things that I believe that I am seeing right now in good light is the separating of the wheat from the chaff, or the wheat and the weeds, the wheat and the tares, the good fish and the bad fish, if you will, or the parable of the virgins, those who had enough oil, that is the spirit, to be prepared for the wedding with the bridegroom, the servant that showed up to the party with the proper garments and the one who did not. These are all parables that Christ gives about people who say that they will be within the church, say that they will be followers and disciples of Christ, and say that they will essentially honor God. And Jesus says to them, I never knew you, you worker of iniquity. Now, there are many factions of Christianity today that will say that that means all kinds of different things, completely antithetical to what Christ taught, or what any of the apostles taught, or what anyone from the 1st through the 3rd centuries taught about Christianity. And that is that there is a level of obedience, and faith was by action. Faith was not by words alone, folks. Faith was shown by your action. You believe what you say by acting it out. Otherwise, you are a hypocrite or an actor. That's what that word meant in Greek. You were an actor. You were a fake or a phony. We know them. Most of them are in the government right now. Most of them are in Hollywood. They do it for a living. Most of them are on the MSNs and the CNNs and the CBSs and whatever else in legacy media. They are all actors. They tell you one thing, they talk out at both sides of their mouth, and then they do another. That is what the natural state of man is. And to live honestly is something harder. So again, he brings up martyrdom here, and I wanted to cover that very briefly. And the reason why is because most of you probably think of martyrdom as dying for a cause. This is the modern meaning of the word. It has become to mean this. But the word actually means to bear a testimony. And this is from Online Etymology Dictionary. This is a very good resource, by the way, folks. If you really want to understand your language and the words in which you use and how they've been manipulated and changed by, let's say, the authoritarian left, the commies, the Marxist, the socialist, and even the fascist, all authoritarian leftists, by the way, you'll see that most of what we think today, the connotations of words, are not their actual true meanings. And it is the pushing upon of institutions, upon the common folk, that has changed the meanings of words. And it is okay to some degree, but we obviously have to discuss things in common terms with each other, in parlance, if you would. But we also should understand the deeper meanings of these things. And it gives us a better understanding of when we read things from the past as well, what they actually meant, as opposed to what we believe with our 21st century beliefs pressed upon them. So it says here, one who bears testimony to faith, especially one who is willingly suffers death rather than surrendering his or her own religious faith. And it says specifically, one of the Christians who is in former times were put to death because they would not renounce their beliefs. But see, it was because they would die for their faith, because they lived their faith, unlike most people who say they are within the church today. The Greek word is sometimes said to be related to murmura, care, trouble, or murmurerin, be anxious or thoughtful, and so forth. It goes into the Sanskrit, Latin, memor, mindful, and seeks phonetic objections to this, and that's a scholar. And loan the word from pre-Greek, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, it goes on. But see, here's the modern definition, mid-15th century, to put to death as a punishment in adherence to some religious belief, which also martyrs, by the way, we often use in terms of political beliefs today, because there's really no separation or difference. But the original use of the words really means a witness, one who testifies, your testimony. The word was adopted directly into Germanic language, Old Saxon, Old Frisarian, martyr, or martyr, an Old German martyr, etc. But Norse used a native formation. Anyways, it says a tortured witness, and it goes on. But I want you to understand this, because most people just think a martyr is someone who just dies for their beliefs, and it is actually beyond that. It's actually your testimony. To die in the early days of the Christian church meant to share in the suffering of Christ and to go into your death without rejecting Christ meant to those people that they would get their crown, that they would be rewarded with eternal life. Something not much taught today in the church, which is basically easy believism. I believe because I say I believe, regardless of how I live or how I try to discipline myself, or lack thereof discipline, I should say. So let's get back to the plague of Cyprian. It says, the plague of Cyprian was a pandemic that affected the Roman Empire about AD 249 to AD 62. The plague is thought to have caused widespread manpower shortages of food production and the Roman army, severely weakening the empire during the great crisis of the 3rd century. Its modern name commemorates Saint Cyprian, Bishop of Carthage, an early Christian writer who witnessed and described the plague. The agent of the plague is highly speculative because sparse sourcing, but suspects have included smallpox, which has been a horrible plague upon humanity for almost all of our history until the last 300 years, really. And modern smallpox vaccination, of course, has pretty much eliminated it, but people were vaccinated smallpox long before that. Pandemic influenza and viral hemorrhagic fever. I'm sorry, guys, if I can't pronounce anything today. And that's like Ebola. So contemporary accounts in 250 to 262, at the height of the outbreak, 5,000 people a day were said to be dying in Rome. 5,000 people a day. Let that sink in for perspective in comparison to what we today are talking about with this pandemic that, by the way, is endemic, meaning it is here to stay. This thing is nothing. Most of the people that are dying, 80% are at life expectancy. 80%. In the aggregate is a 97% survival rate. It's actually higher than that, but 97% in the aggregate of those folks, of those people at life expectancy. In the aggregate as a whole, as all of society, has like a 98, 99% survival rate. If you go below life expectancy, it has a 99.9% survival rate, meaning it is exactly, if you are under life expectancy, essentially, or of not elderly age, basically under 65, you have the same risk of dying from a flu. Is that worth destroying everything? The reason why I bring all this up today, and the reason why I'm going to talk about the plague of Cyprian, is because I am sick and tired of people who say that they are in the church and that are Christians that are kowtowing to all of this stuff. This is not in any way, shape, or form about you and your service to God or Christ. It is about your simple fear. In your fear of death. And I am sorry, folks, but you will die. It is part of life. We will all die. Most of us will make it to life expectancy. But I don't know about you, but at about 40 years old, I know quite a few people. In fact, I've known for a decade or more who have died that I went to high school with. They didn't make it. Some of it was their own faults. Sometimes it was tragic accidents. It happens. You know, I used to work with, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but I used to work with the uncle and the father, actually, of a baseball player. There was a young up-and-coming baseball player who played for the Angels a few years back. He was from Williamsport, Maryland, from that area. He pitched his opening game that night, first opening game. He'd been with the team for 2 or 3 years. Pitched pretty much the whole game. Went out that night, was hit by a car, died instantly. Dead. Very tragic for the family. Very young man, very promising career. Life is fragile. It is easily destroyed. I do not say or take anything about what is going on lightly. What I see is the truth. And the truth is that this thing will do more damage to society as a whole if we do not go about living our lives, if we continue to have our economies locked down, if people continue to be out of work, and if we allow the governments and corporations to conglomerate their power, and people like Klaus Schwab to enact their agendas, their UN agendas, that's basically Agenda 21, folks, of the Great Reset. This will be far more destructive to humanity. And to them, the ends justify the means, because they don't care. The ends for them is, we need to save the earth. We need to control people. They've wrote about it for over 100 years. I cover this topic over and over and over again. Now, I talk about other things, of course. Sometimes I'll talk about politics specifically. Sometimes I'll talk about the news. But as Christians, we should know that this is coming. It is written about. Maybe you're not a Christian. Maybe you don't believe in any of this stuff, but you want to know what Christians believe or think. Well, they believe a myriad of things, actually, all kinds of stuff that isn't necessarily biblical or based in early teachings. But what I will tell you is that there is an appropriate and proper way that is easy to understand, that isn't influenced by people from centuries later. It isn't influenced by Augustine and his Manichaean, Gnostic, Stoic ideas. It isn't influenced by the papacy. It isn't influenced by men like John Calvin or Martin Luther, who were Augustinians. Or people like Ellen G. White, who seem to think that she was some sort of prophetess of God, along with, other folks like Smith of Mormonism and whatever else of the age. There are appropriate understandings, and it goes back to just simple reading and not adding to the text and comparing everything to everything. You can't take one line out of the Bible and make an entire doctrine out of it. This is pretty much basic epistemology. One of the things that the modern church likes to do is they say, well, Paul said, when I'm absent from the body, I'm present with the Lord. Therefore, we die and go straight to heaven. Yet that's a Gnostic belief. And everyone in the early church would have condemned you as a heretic for saying such a thing. It's not what is taught in the Bible or what was believed in by the Jews originally or the early church. And I'm not saying the early church got everything completely right either, because they got away from their Jewish roots. But again, I'm saying all this to you because there are people that I know in my life. There are things that I've seen. In fact, I'm going to show you in a few days. People are just going along with this. And maybe you don't believe. Maybe you just think that it's good to have religion for some psychological reason or some personal reason, or you don't think that it's truly a reality. But I'm here to tell you that for those of us, such as myself, who believe it is a reality, and you may think whatever of me as you would, I know for a fact that I am logically based in this and have seen the evidences, the profound evidence, and have experienced miracles in my life, 1,000%. Personality changes, all kinds of stuff, and I've seen it in other people. But regardless, perhaps you just think, oh, it's just good to go to church because of the socialization, because of this and that, because of the good moral lessons. Well, Christ requires more of you, folks. He requires more of you. But in any case, let's keep moving here. Back to the wiki article. This is Pontius of Carthage wrote of the plague at Carthage. Afterwards, there broke out a dreadful plague, an excessive destruction of a hateful disease invading every house in succession. of the trembling populace, carrying off day by day in abrupt attack numberless people, everyone from his own house. All were shuddered, fleeing, shunning, and contagion, impiously exposing their own friends, as if with the exclusion of the person who was surely to die of the plague. One could include death itself also. There lay about, in the meanwhile, over the whole city, no longer bodies, but the carcasses of many. And by the contemplation of a lot which in their turn would be theirs, demanded the pity of the passers-by for themselves. No one regarded anything besides his cruel gains. No one trembled at the resemblance of similar event. No one did another what he himself wished to experience. Do unto others, folks. And what they're sitting here saying is no one took care of them. They let them die, as we are doing now. And we are letting people be in harsh, tragic circumstances that is unfounded. And many of you, again, like the Church of Laodicea, you say you are rich, but you are poor, as Christ said. You are poor in spirit. You say you are rich, but you are lukewarm, and he vomits you out of his mouth. Because you're comfortable. You're far too comfortable. I don't know what comfortable living is, folks. I mean, I do, because I live in the United States, and I've always been at least, except for in my very early 20s, the lower middle class. So that's pretty comfortable. It really is. But most of the jobs I've ever had and most of the stuff I've had done in my life has been exceedingly uncomfortable. I don't live in any sort of wealth, nor do I care to. Now, do I live in wealth as opposed to the rest of the world? Absolutely. If you make over $33,000 a year, folks, you are in the top 1% of all income earners in the entire globe. We don't know how good we have it here. But in comparison to other folks in the United States, no, I don't have some sort of crazy... I don't have some sort of crazy wealth or luxury. Let me reload this page here. Well, we can come back to it. Just a few other things. Biblical Archaeology Society, Bible History Daily. The Cyprian plague, evidence of apocalypse, pandemic, discovered in ancient Thebes. This was from January 7th, 2017. Archaeologists' work in Thebes, modern Luxor, and Egypt have discovered evidence of a plague that ravaged the Roman Empire in the 3rd century. The so-called Cyprian plague, likely caused by a form of measles or smallpox, was so devastating that one eyewitness believed the world was coming to an end. During the excavations on the funerary complex of Hawara, and I'm not going to try and pronounce that word, an Italian archaeologist mission to Luxor led by Francisco Trinadretti uncovered charred human remains saturated in lime. The lime, historically used as a disinfectant, was used in 3 kennels discovered in the complex. A huge bonfire where the victims were burned was also found. The archaeologists used pottery discoveries and the kennels to date the burial in the 3rd century. Between the about 250 and 271, a plague known as Cyprian plague swept across Egypt and the rest of the Roman Empire, reportedly claiming more than 5,000 victims a day in Rome alone, etc. And of course, let's see if I can get this article back up. Well, it doesn't want to work. Oh, wait, nope. There it is. Happens, folks. This is what you do when you do things in one take. The Plague of Cyprian. This was December 13th. It's not going to give it to me. We'll go here. So, anyways, that was an older article, though. So before we've had this great coof pandemic. This is from PastorArmstrong.com. It says, or it's .cdn.amproject.org, sorry. But it says Christian love during the plague of Cyprian. Obviously, you could just Google this. This is from 3 years ago. It says approximately 250 to 270. A plague disseminated the Roman Empire. We've already read about this. So here are here's an account from Eusebius, if I'm not mistaken. It says, most of our brethren showed love and loyalty in not sparing themselves while helping one another. Now, this is something that Cyprian talked about. This is he saw this as martyrdom, putting yourself in danger. I know people right now who claim to be Christians who will not put themselves or their families in danger, even to see or meet with other family. And they're using excuses like, don't you just have faith that they'll be okay? That there's nowhere in the Bible that states anything like that. It is our responsibility and our duty to fellow men and women of the faith, and even outside of the faith, but primarily first those in the faith, to comfort them and help them and provide for them. So, when you say such a thing, you are talking nonsense, and you are talking about yourself and your own greed and your own ego. You are a hypocrite, an actor, a fake, and a phony, and you do not believe in anything that you espouse to believe. And I know that based on your actions. It says, most of our brethren show love and loyalty in not sparing themselves while helping one another, tending to the sick, with no thought of danger, and gladly departing this life with them after becoming infected with their disease. Many who nursed others to health died themselves, thus transferring their death to themselves. The best of our brethren lost their lives in this way. Some, the presbyters, deacons, and laymen, a form of death based on strong faith and piety that seems in every way equal to martyrdom. They would also take up the bodies of the saints, close their eyes, shut their mouths, and carry them on their shoulders. They would embrace them, wash and dress them in burial clothes, and soon receive the same services themselves, willingly going to their death, potentially, not even knowing, but potentially. How far you have fallen, the church has. How far. The heathens were the exact opposite. They pushed away those with the first signs of the disease and fled from their dearest. They then threw them, half dead, into the roads and treated unburied corpses like refuse in hopes of avoiding plague of death, which for all their efforts was difficult to escape. Now, this was Eusebius. And Bishop of Alexandria, Dionysius scribed. Okay, so it's a reprint of a letter that we can find in Eusebius from Dionysius, the Bishop of Alexandria to Dionysius. So this was very Eusebius was the first big church historian. And I don't agree with everything Eusebius writes. He writes certain things like he didn't believe that the book of Revelation should be canon. But again, you should take note of the fact that he was trying to construct the history of the church in the 4th century, reconstruct it. And here he says, love the Lord with all your God and all your heart, with all your mind and soul, and with all your strength. The second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. There's no commandment greater than these. And that is Mark 12:30-31. And that, Christ said that, of course, several times. Here is the actual treatise on the mortality. This is directly from Cyprian. You can find this in the early church writings.com or .org or whatever it is. Just Google early church writings, and you can find Cyprian's writings in this. So it says here, the deacon and Pontus, in a few words, unfolds the brethren of this treatise in his life of Cyprian. First of all, having pointed out that the afflictions of this kind had been foretold by Christ, he tells them that the mortality or plague was not to be feared, and that it leads to immortality. and that therefore that man is wanting in faith who is not eager for a better world. He's talking about the next world, not this one. The next life, if you would. Nor is it wonderful that the evils of this life are common to the Christians with the heathens, since they have to suffer more than others in the world. And thence, after the example of Job and Tobias. Yeah, recall the book of Job, folks, where Job was just punished over and over and over again, as a testament and test of his faith. There is need of patience without murmuring. For unless the struggle proceeded, the victory could not ensue. And how much soever disease are common to the virtuous and vicious, yet the death is not common to them. For the righteous are taken to consolation, while the unrighteous taken to punishment. And here, this is pages after pages. I'll just read a paragraph or two. It says, although in very many of you, dearly beloved brethren, there is a steadfast mind and a firm faith and a devoted spirit that is not disrupted at the frequency of this present mortality, but like a strong and stable rock, rather shatters the turbulent onset of the world and the raging waves of time, while it is not itself shattered, and it is not overcome, but tired by these temptations. Yet because I observe that among the people, some, either through weakness of mind, or through decay of faith, or through the sweetness of worldly life, or through the softness of their sex, he's talking about women here, or what is still greater account, through error from the truth, are standing less steadily, and are exerting the divine and unvanquished vigor of their hearts. The matter may not be disguised nor kept in silence, but as far as feeble powers suffice, with my full strength and with a discourse gathered from the Lord's lessons, the slothfulness of a luxurious disposition must be restrained. And he who has begun to be already a man of God and of Christ must be found worthy of God and Christ. For he who has wars for God, dearest brethren, ought to acknowledge himself as one who, placed in the heavenly camp, already hopes for divine things, that is, things to come, so that we may have no trembling, that the storms and whirlwinds of the world, and no disturbance, since the Lord that had foretold of these would come. With an exhortation of his foreseeing word, instructions, and teachings, and preparing and strengthening of people of his church for all endurance of things to come. He predicted and said that wars, famines, and earthquakes, and pestilence would arise in each place, and unless an unexpected and new dread of mischief should shake us. He previously warned us that the adversity would increase more and more in the last times. And again, I could go on, but he's basically chiding people for being fearful. And he's saying that God told us that these things would happen. Jesus said these things would happen. So before I go here, I want to bring up a couple things real quick about what we are seeing today. And this is Infectious Disease Zone, some random site I came across, .org, .uk, whatever. Looks like a little forum. And then there's a question. These are supposed to be experts. How many people die from the common cold every year? Now, this was in 2014. And here it talks about influenza. And it says rhinovirus kills an estimated 4,500 deaths in the U.S. A lot of these deaths could probably occur at either older people or those who suffer in medical conditions, and they cannot cope with the virus as well. Now, why do I bring this up? Because what we're seeing actually with COVID is people getting and dying from pneumonia or dying because of heart-related conditions. In the heart-related conditions has to do with their lung capacity and ability to breathe. This has to be understood, folks, in a greater context that, according to the CDC, 6% of the folks that are listed as COVID deaths right now are actually COVID deaths. The rest of them died of something else. We don't classify deaths from rhinovirus or whatever may cause the cold, what we call the common cold. We don't classify these deaths. You know why? Because people don't die typically from the common cold. They die from the bacterial pneumonia that is a complication of the common cold. And that's what we're really seeing is complications from the coof. And what we're seeing, as I've explained in previous videos, is that the mortality rate actually has not changed. The excess deaths has not changed. Now, I could be wrong, but if we go back, the data will dictate what, in a year or so, what has actually happened. And we know, like in the UK, that people who died 28 days after a positive coof test were said to have died of the coof, regardless of how they died. Right? So much so that it's a meme and a joke now. Dude falls off a ladder. Died of the coof. You know, there's the George Floyd joke because he had the coof. You know, you folks out there living in fear, especially you folks who call yourselves Christian, you need to pray for yourself that your faith will be increased and that Christ will give you some strength and bravery. So this is from Medical Express. This is from December 23rd, 2019. How convenient. Can you die from the common cold? And it says most people know that the flu can kill. Indeed, the so-called Spanish flu killed more than 50 million people in 1918. More than were killed in the First World War. The cold is a collection of symptoms: coughing, sneezing, runny noses, and there's like 5 coronaviruses, by the way, folks, that are known to cause the common cold. And what we're seeing now is only that. By the way, this article right here is highlighted because I brought it up. I just wanted to read the first few lines of that because I'm going to show you some data. The rhinovirus causes about half of all colds, but other viruses can cause one or more of the symptoms of the cold, including adenovirus, influenza, respiratory, syncytial virus, and peri-influenza. Common cold is normally a mild illness that resolves without treatment in a few days. Its mild nature mostly are self-diagnosed, blah, blah, blah. Complications from a cold can cause serious illness. By the way, anytime I've ever gone in to test for the flu, I've always tested. I've never tested positive for the flu, folks, because we don't test but for one influenza disease, or 2 at best. Same with the immunizations. I'm going to show you something on that too, because that's kind of funny. And it says here, for example, studies have shown that patients who have undergone a bone marrow transplant can have a higher likelihood of developing serious respiratory infections, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, my daughter had a cold the other year. It was in the spring, and developed pneumonia, bacterial pneumonia. She had a really bad cough for over a month, started coughing up fluid. I'd taken her in once or twice, but finally, you know, took her in, got her the correct antibiotics. She was fine, but it was a little bit scary, you know? And this happens. Well, how did it happen? Well, it happened from a cold. Now, if that had happened and she wasn't, I don't know, 12 at the time, 11, however old she was, it may have been worse sooner. If she was older, it may have been worse sooner. And people keep talking about underlying conditions, which I definitely think is an issue, because obviously if you have underlying conditions, there's more stress on your body. And people say they had no underlying conditions. You don't know that. You might believe that, but you don't know that. No doctor has gone inside and looked at your arteries. They don't know what's going on inside your brain. They don't know if there's plaque buildups. They just don't know, folks. And you'd be surprised. Most of you who think you eat a healthy diet, you eat your fruits and vegetables and grains or whatever, you are probably full of inflammation. And you think you're just getting older. But the reality is that you're killing yourself through food. But again, I digress. It says, there is, of course, more than one way for someone to become very sick after infection with a respiratory virus. Some viruses, such as the adenovirus, can also cause symptoms through the body, including gastrointestinal tract and urinary tract and liver, I guess, infections. Other viruses like influenza can themselves potentially cause severe inflammation in the lungs. but they can also lead to particularly serious conditions such as bacterial pneumonia. Now, why do I read all this? Because this can happen with a common cold. We just don't count it. We count other things. You can also have a cold and influenza at the same time. So here's that link that's up here about research articles. Centuries of data show COOF likely to impact the brain. This just seems like a nonsensical article, but this came out January 5th, so just yesterday. It says, published in January 5th in Alzheimer's and Dementia. The Journal for Alzheimer's Associated cites decades of published scientific evidence to make a compelling case for SARS-CoV-2 expected long-term effects on the brain and nervous system. Well, I don't think so. And it continues to go on. Your brain's already dying, folks, of a type of diabetes and lack of flushing of neurotoxins because of byproducts and waste. Cerebral spinal fluid isn't flushing out those things, which it needs to do every night. By the way, folks, sleep on your stomach or your side. If you sleep on your back, that does not happen as well. Just a little health tip. We know this from animal studies primarily. We know it's very important if you sleep on your back, you're going to snore more often, wake up, that cerebral spinal fluid does not flush out, and that is not removing metabolic waste products, and that builds up in your brain, and therefore you're more likely to get Alzheimer's and dementia. It's also why if you don't sleep well, folks, you're pretty dumb the next day. And I know I suffer from sleep disorders. Just saying. So here we have the National Library of Medicine, coronavirus infection in myelosuppressed adults, blood marrow transplant recipients, and it talks about it as this one article refers to here about the transplant recipients. Here, just random, just, kind of keep it a little bit balanced from Reuters. Fact check, you are not more likely to die from the common cold than the COOF. And, yes, someone said in some post something about, it's nonsense, but they go on. They said, the common cold is generally not lethal, with rare exceptions. The Digital Health Lab explains, the flu, which is deadlier than the common cold, killed 0.1% of the people who contracted it in 2019. It is still too early to discern accurate global death estimates for people who have contracted the COOF, but estimates have ranged from 1% to 25% of all cases, depending on the country. It's not 25%, folks. This is absolutely absurd and ridiculous. This article was released, what was the date here? In September 22nd. There is nowhere a 25%, there's nowhere where there's a 25% death rate for this thing. I've shown you the numbers in video after video, time and time and time again. Absolutely insane. And it goes on. It says adults on average get a common cold about 3 to 4 times a year. Kids get it anywhere between 6 to 10 times a year. I've actually not had a cold since in over a year. I was a little run down a few weeks back, so maybe I did catch something, or maybe I just didn't eat something right. But a lot of, for me personally, is I've had some food allergy issues, and I've had to figure that out, and I've noticed I've been a lot less sick. Barlow said, since over 50% of common colds are caused by the rhinovirus, that's such a generic thing. Rhinovirus isn't even a virus. Rhinovirus means nose virus, literally. If it had a similar or higher mortality rate and caused multiple infections per year, there would be a massive mortality. Well, we don't count it as the cold. And I do think that the COOF is a little bit more lethal than the other 5 coronaviruses that cause common colds. But, that's just some food for thought there. So here are some numbers. This is goodrx.com. Let's see, I'll close that out here. So how do the COOF annual deaths and flu mortality rates stack up, blah, 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 blah. I don't care about the article. I just want this little thing here. This is the cases of the flu from 2017 to 2018, 45 million, 61,000 deaths. And then 2019, much less. Now, we were already on par to say we had less flu statistics that year, or less flu numbers before the COOF came in. And then we have COOF 5 million, and then all these deaths. So that rate would seem to be higher. But again, it's a matter of how we're counting it. People have covered this before. I've covered it to some degree, whatever. When you have a place like Argentina that had a 60%, Argentina, one of the strictest lockdowns in the world, had a 60% infection rate of the entire population. 60% of the population had been infected. When you have that, 60% of your population infected, and you still have the same death rate that they have, the 40,000 people that died out of 40 million, it's the same death rate. It's always the same death rate, folks, and it's always the same people. It's those who are unhealthy. And just because you think you're healthy doesn't mean that you are. Just because you work out a lot and you think you're in shape doesn't mean that you're healthy. Health is far beyond a measure of looking at someone. I would say, are you healthy? Just general guidelines. If you don't get sick very often, you're probably healthy. If you don't have any intestinal issues, like you have regular bowel movements, you're probably decently healthy. If you don't have any sort of skin diseases like rashes or anything like that, you're probably healthy. If you don't have any sort of arthritis or inflammation that bothers you, you're probably healthy. If you have any of those three things, like you're sick several times a year, you have really bad gut inflammation like diarrhea or whatever, or constipation, you're not healthy. You have really bad acne or let's say some sort of autoimmune thing that comes out in your skin, eczema, something like that, rosacea, you're probably not healthy. You're probably less healthy than you think. Obviously, there are other things like high blood sugar and all that kind of stuff as well. So let's look at some CDC numbers real quick. Number of deaths, leading causes of deaths. This is from 2018. So we have heart disease, number 1. Cancer, number 2. Accidental injuries. Now, right now, the COOF is in between these two, but we've kind of quit counting heart disease and started labeling it the COOF, right? Stroke, that's part of heart disease. Same thing. Alzheimer's. So back here to this article. Again, you guys can look at the article. I'm not really caring to go through it that detailed, but we got diabetes. All these things are risks, by the way, for the COOF. Now, influenza and pneumonia, 60,000 people in 2018. Well, this number doesn't quite count that right, but it does here. So I guess that's from fall to spring when the flu season typically is. I don't know. Here we have a weekly U.S. influenza surveillance report. This is again from the CDC. Update. Week 52, ending December 26, 2020. Seasonal influenza activity in the United States remains lower than usual for this time of year. And it says 1.6% this week, below the national baseline of 2.6%. Well, you could say it's social distancing, it's the mask, it's whatever else. Then why is the COOF number still rising? Stop being stupid and stop willfully being ignorant, folks. Be consistent, have principles, stop being a faker, an actor. Live up to your principles, live up to the things that you say you live by. Either it's stopping one and therefore both, or it doesn't work. And folks, it doesn't work. I've covered that before. I've gone through the studies. Maybe not every single one. You might say, Bill, you didn't go through every single study. I know that. I went through the most relevant studies. They make the most sense. And trust me, I've been reading studies for a very long time. Often they're mired with nonsense. So here, this is from ABC News. It says flu numbers are down this year due to higher vaccination rates. I doubt that. Experts say mask use and social distancing have also helped. Then why haven't they helped with the COOF? That's December 18th, 2020. Hospitals across the U.S. are nearing critical capacity due to the rise in the COOF. This is a lie. The hospitals almost always run, and I've worked in hospitals for many years. Not directly, but I did work for a hospital for a while. That was my last full-time employment job. But I've worked in hospital settings for a long time. They always run at capacity. They want to run at about 85% capacity for their own profit margins. And they often run higher than that. And there are codes within the hospital, how many beds that they have. Guess what? They usually run to 90-95% capacity all of the time. And that was the reason to lock down and slow the spreads, flatten the curve, all that stuff. Flatten the curve, remember? Flatten that curve. So it says, hospitals across the U.S. are nearing critical capacity due to the rise in the COOF, just as the winter flu season begins to threaten the country. Public officials and doctors worried. Worst yet. Yeah, this is just all propaganda fear-mongering, folks. It's because you don't pay attention. Centers of Disease Control tracking the flu vaccine distribution over the years, showing that so far in 2020-2021 flu season, 189.4 million flu vaccines have been distributed in the U.S. compared to 174 million from the year before. So flu is down because just over 10 million more people, 15 million or so, have taken the vaccine. No. Especially not with a vaccine that's only 40% effective. And by the way, folks, every time, except for my former employment, because I had to take the flu vaccine working in a hospital, but every time I've ever taken a flu vaccine voluntarily, I have gotten sick with the flu. Now, I didn't the other year, so apparently I got the right one at that point, or I just built up my immune system working in the hospital environment, which happens. I remember the first year I worked in the jail. I was married then to, I had been married previously, and my ex-wife had a son who was going into kindergarten. And his teacher, it was her first year kindergarten, first year teaching, and she was sick constantly, out constantly. And he was sick, and I was sick constantly that year. I must have been 6, 7, 8 times that year. And first time I ever had, I don't know if that was the first year I ever had strep. I might be wrong about that. But it was like one of the first times I ever had, I was getting migraines, like really bad migraines. First time I ever had a sinus infection. That's what it was. Never had a sinus infection before. And my son got kind of sick. So him being in kindergarten, me being in the jail, exposed to all these things. Now, over the years of working in the jail, yeah, if something went through the jail, typically most everybody got it. But it wasn't as bad. And I certainly had good years where I didn't have to take sick leave at all. But a lot of that is due to stress and other things as well, folks. Like I said, inflammation. Inflammation is huge. If you're stressed out, you're going to have inflammation. Real quick before I get off here, I wanted to bring up this. Bisonosis was first recognized in the 17th century. It was widely known in Europe and England by the early 19th century. Well, what is bisonosis? This is from Britannica. Also called brown lung or brown lung disease, respiratory disorder caused by the inhalation of endotoxin produced by bacteria in the fibers of cotton. Bisonosis is common among textile workers who often inhale significant amounts of cotton dust. If you are wearing a cotton mask, you are breathing in microparticulates of cotton. Now, I'm not a big fan of masks. I'm not telling you what to do. I just don't like it being mandated. I will wear one to get in the store and usually pull it down or put it up if I'm around people to make them comfortable. That's me. Generally speaking, though, I think it's silly. It doesn't do anything. The mask I wear, though, is a bandana, and I can breathe because I have all this air underneath here, but anything I project out is not going to get on anybody. I'm also not sick. I also don't have the COOF, and I don't want to hear that asymptomatic spread nonsense unless I'm sneezing or coughing. I'm not projecting aerosol, or if I'm spitting on you when I talk, which I don't tend to do. So let's go over to Wiki real quick. It says exposure to cotton dust in an inadequately ventilated working environment. Bisonosis commonly occurs in workers who are employed in yarn and fabric manufacture industries And it is now thought that the cotton dust directly causes the disease, and some believes that the causative agents are endotoxins that come from the cell walls of gram-negative bacteria that grow in the cotton. Now, if you recall, I brought up to you before, recently, some epidemiologists who basically talked about this. Now, I brought this up in the past as well, who talked about the bacteria growth in these masks. Now, if you switch out your mask regularly, you might not have an issue with it. You're also getting, to some degree, a form of hypoxia. But even more so, you're breathing in carbon, the carbon dioxide that you've expelled, which isn't the best of things to do, folks. In any case, I'm just saying, just a consideration as you wear your mask. I'm not trying to fearmonger here. I just want you to be educated. I want you to know. Of the 81 bisonosis-related fatalities reported in the United States from 1990 to 91, 48% occurred in the occupation of yarn, thread, and fabric industries of the victim's death certificate. This disease often occurs in times of the industrial revolution. Most commonly, young girls who work in mills or textile factories would be affected with the disease. In the United States from 1996 to 2005, North Carolina accounted for 37% of all deaths caused by bisonosis, with 31% followed by South Carolina. So textile industries have an issue with this. But the point is that the longer we do these things, the more you will see this, the more you're going to have these issues. But really what I want you to understand, folks, the whole point of this whole thing is that this plague that we are seeing right now, it's not that bad. And we need to quit acting like it is. And we need to understand that there's worse suffering in the world right now. And those of you, and I primarily see this, those of you that watch the legacy media, and that's all you watch, you're the ones who are being brainwashed right now because you're not reading anything else. You're just buying it hook, line, and sinker. Those of you who have wealth, well, you're not going to have wealth when the Great Reset comes and things continually are destroyed. Those of you that own your own businesses and they're being stripped away, I have friends that have lost their business over this. I hope you're waking up, folks. I hope you're realizing what's actually going on. We'll see what the shakeout is tonight after things on the House floor after congressional hearings over the certification. But I pretty much think that they're going to give it to Biden. We're going to go into this Great Reset. Things are going to get really bad. Hyperinflation is on the way. And you ought to be prepared. I'm not here to fearmonger. I'm just saying be prepared in your hearts. Like Christ told you, things will happen. But you will know better. And know that it is your duty as a Christian to serve God, to reject the way of the world. And if you're concerned about this and protecting your families and whatever, or you're afraid that you're going to get it, well, frankly, you're a coward and you're not living for Christ. And that's just one man's opinion, but I can tell you, Cyprian agreed with me. You can go through and read this. This is several pages long, by the way. He agrees with me. I can tell you. So anyways, folks, with all that, hey, the Ends Justify the Memes, our live show. Go check us out. We'll be live tonight. Tonight is Wednesday, January 6th. We'll be live over on DLive and YouTube. On DLive, it is the Ends_Justify_Memes. I am on Rumble, all -1, because YouTube will probably not let me talk about this forever. I am also on, I got a locals page. Oh, let's see if it'll come up. Will it come up? There she is. Which I will be uploading to directly. There's one for the Ends Justify the Memes, but my producer, he hasn't really put anything up there yet. But I'm just saying, if you want to start following a locals page, locals is a social media where you only interact and follow those that you want to interact and follow with, basically. And I should be able to upload to here directly, so in case YouTube, finally gets wise that I'm making controversial content, even though I don't think there's anything controversial about it, but controversial to their globalist ideals, then you can go over there, and it is at all -1 word, .locals.com. And here it's at all _-1. So you can go find that. With all that, folks, hey, please like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Leave a comment. I'll comment back if I got time. You know, don't always have time. Keep your heads up. Stuff is coming, but, you know, life could be worse too. And life is suffering, folks. The world is not an easy place, even when you live in the luxury that we live in here in the United States. So, with all that said, I wish you all well.